Hi friends, so today we are going to sew the owl together. So you're going to start with your big body, and this end we are going to want that on one side when we fold it in half, because eventually we're going to use that to sew this together. So keep that on one side, and then either that or that will be the front side of your owl. So we're going to go like this, and then the first thing we want to do is place the eyes where we want them. So you want to keep them symmetrical is one of the biggest things. I'm going to take my two eyes here. I'm going to place them about 4 rows down and then 1 to 2 stitches apart. In order to make sure that they are the same distance from each side of the owl, what you can do is, so you have your 2 corners, these can be your 2 corners, you can take those and put them together. And then this will be a fold right down the middle of the front of your owl. So you can take the one eye, and then to place them to make sure they don't move, you can use straight pins. I don't have any, so I'm just going to use bobby pins. Again, about 1, 2, 3, 4 rows down, and then 1 to 2 stitches. So it'll just be 1 stitch on the side here. I'm just going to put a couple bobby pins in just to hold it in place so that it doesn't move from where I want it. And push these in a little bit farther. And then take our fold again, go back and get the other side of it. And place it about 1 stitch in and the 4 rows down. And then when you open it back up, so they are even from side to side, but what we want to look at here is the eyebrows, because we want those symmetrical as well. If they're too far in, the owl might look angry, or if they're uneven, it's just not going to look right. So I like mine tilted out a little bit more, so I like about where that one is, so I'm going to change this one so it's the same. I'll put my pins back in. And that's about where I want my eyes, and I'm ready to sew it into place. Alright, so for sewing my eyes, we have all these strings going everywhere. We're going to get rid of the ones for the eyebrows for right now, because we're going to use those a little bit later. I'll just push those up there. This extra one from the top, get rid of that one. And then we should have just mainly our 2 white ones. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the string, large yarn needle, and then we are going to use the running stitch to go all the way around these stitches under the eyes, and we're going to go under the eyebrow for that too. So I'm going to take this other end of the eyebrow and just tuck it underneath, and then I can go in to the back on that spot, and then up, making sure it doesn't move very much. With the pin should help with that. And then after we have it, the base down there, what we can do is we can just pick up a piece underneath here and then come back up to use the running stitch to go all the way around. And you're going to want the yarn going through every single stitch. So every stitch that you had crocheted gets a stitch while you're sewing on. And you're not going to pull it super tight that the yarn feels like it's going to break, but you want to make sure that it's firmly tight and not any extra loops. So we're just going to keep going all the way around, sewing this on. And then when we get to the eyebrow, we're going to keep doing this running stitch, but we're going to go underneath the eyebrow. So that's why we're not using the whip stitch going around the edge like this, because we're going to go underneath this eyebrow here. So still go in like you were doing between every stitch in this last round here, pretending the eyebrow isn't even there, and just sew right under that eyebrow. And you won't even be able to see where your stitches are with this. Last stitch here. Oh, there's one more before where I started. Get rid of these pins for now. All right, and then we'll go in one last stitch to the back, and then in the back to knot it off. This is the way we'll knot everything off while we're sewing this together. We're gonna make one loop, not pull it all the way through, not going all the way to the front. Just catch a loop on the back so we have our white loop, go through it, and go through it again, and then we're gonna tighten that off. And then you can just leave this on the back for right now. So then we have, when we're looking down at the owl, the eye is securely on now, but there is this white part at the top here. I don't like how that looks. You can leave it if you want to and just weave this extra end in, but I'm going to use this extra end to tack down the eyebrow over that white spot. So I'm just going to use the same thing I did, the running stitch, except making sure it's in every stitch of the eyebrow now, not that white part, and making sure that eyebrow part is down over the white. And this white part is there because we only slip stitch to make this eyebrow. I think that it's too thick if we had done a single crochet, but the single crochet would also have eliminated this white part. There you go. Now your eyebrows tacked down. You can't see white over it. Looks a lot nicer in my opinion. We're going to do the same thing on the back to knot it off. Make a loop. Loop through twice. And then, so you have these two in back. I usually just knot them together because this entire inside part of the owl is going to be stuffed. So there's really not a lot of need to weave them in. You can if you want to. I normally just knot them together and then we'll cut them off. Alright, so the other thing to keep in mind when you're sewing these on, I'm on my second one now here. See how this is kind of flat at the bottom? That just has to do with where the increases are and what you've sewed already. But make sure the bottom of this one, see it's on this row right here, so follow that across and make sure that one lines up the same. So it's still lining up the same, but still looking a bit flat. So what we can do is we can just kind of pull it and adjust it where we're sewing to give that more of a round look. And then when you're sewing and doing this running stitch, because you're not doing the whip stitch and just picking up loops from the top, you have to make sure that you don't go all the way through and pick up the back of the owl, because then on the inside here, I don't know if you can see that, it's catching the back of the owl, and then your eye will be sewn through both layers and that won't be very helpful. So make sure you're only catching that one. This is a bit harder to catch them both when you're using the big blanket yarn, but on smaller pieces it's a lot easier to mess that up. And then you just have a big headache later. I'm gonna finish sewing this, and then we'll sew the nose on. Alright, so we're going to sew the nose on now. So we're going to start with placing it just like we did the eyes. Since there's only one, it's not as hard to get them symmetrical. So we're gonna use the pins that we did before, make sure both our tails are out. I'm gonna cover this top corner with a corner of that eye and this corner with the corner of that eye, and just center that right up in there. Stick some pins in the middle here to keep it in place where I want it, but again, using pins isn't quite as important. So I'm gonna start with the point here because that's where my tail is coming off of. And then I am just gonna make sure it stays a point. So I'm just gonna pull that piece down, put that in the bottom, and then this one I am gonna come on the inside instead of just catching it. We're still gonna do the running stitch to the up and down, but we're gonna go all the way to the inside just to make sure those stitches stay where I want them to. So keep it shaped as you're sewing it on, otherwise it will look rounded. And then come back up and sew up this side here, pulling it out to keep that side straight. And then this corner up here, it'll be a little bit of loop, so make sure you get at least 2 strands there. So that 1 strand, and then go into the corner of the eye here, just to keep that end tight. And then I'm actually gonna come up into the eye, not the nose. And then I'm gonna loop that into the nose again, and that's gonna give that corner a little bit more of a point than it would have had otherwise. How nice and pointy that is. And then we'll sew across the top here. I'll get rid of these pins now. And keeping this top flat. And then before we get to this end here, this end that we started with, I left that on there because what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take my hook here and go up and in from the inside. So I'm going to go through this stitch of white, and then I'm going to pull that through into the back. Then we'll use that in a minute for knotting that off. It just gets it out of the way for now. Then we're going to do what we did before. Pull that up. And then go into this corner. And come back into this corner to keep that point. Not going through the nose yet, and then going back into the nose to make it pointy. And going down this side, it'll bulk a little bit here depending where your increases, decreases are. I said this in the pattern, but I actually do the decrease instead of visible decrease, because otherwise it makes a little bit more holes there. Only for this nose. The rest of the pattern I do invisible decrease. But just kind of keeping it straight and stitching it so it is straight even with those bulky edges. And then we're going to do the same thing on the bottom to make this point. So we're going to go pull this end of the nose, if I can get it out as far as we can to make a point. And then it was still a bit rounded on the bottom, so I might come up just into the owl, not the nose. A little farther down than I wanted it. There we go. And then come back into the nose now, which will give a little bit more point on that end. So now we have a lot more triangular nose than we started with. And then flip it inside out to the back. Oh, get this extra piece out. And we're going to knot it off the same way we did the eyes. So loop that through. Twice. Get the end out of the way and pull it tight. Get the needle off. And then just knot these ends together. Double knot, and then cutting them off, leaving a little bit of a long tail. Again, this will all be covered on the inside, but that just makes those ends a little bit more secure. All right, so now we have the nose on. Now we're gonna put the eyes on. I like to use safety eyes on my products. I do not have the actual safety eyes. The ones I have in this size are mushroom. If you had the safety eyes, you would place them where you want it, secure them on the back through both layers. If you're going to stitch eyes on, you can stitch those on now. If you're going to sew buttons on, you can sew those on. These are the mushroom eyes, so I'm going to sew these on with a bit of acrylic yarn. You do not want to use the blanket yarn to sew stuff on. So I'll show you with one of my scraps here. If you pull it hard enough, it just snaps. And that would definitely be a choking hazard. Get yellow all over. So I'm going to sew my mushroom eyes on where I want them, and then I'll just make sure that I loop through the back of this with my acrylic yarn several times, and then attach it in a wide base all over the back of the owl. And then we'll knot it off on the inside, and we'll sew the wings on. Alright, now that we have our eyes on, we're going to put the wings on. So as far as placement, remember how we had this folded in half? This is going to be our top corner. So then these are automatically the sides. So like we did before, we take these two top corners, put them together, and then we'll have our sides here. But if we go back and fold it down the sides, then we can place the wings evenly on those folds on the sides. The wings are designed so that they do have this little bit of, I guess, puff right there. So what will happen is after we sew these on, you can either have them out like that, which I think is cuter, or it can be more rounded like that. Depending on what style you want, will depend how you're gonna sew them on. It's not that much different, but we'll start with placing them where we want them. So I'm gonna go about across from the middle of the eye and then slightly below that on that side, and then fold it around so it's even on that side. And I'm going to do the same on the other side, go about halfway across and slightly down, so it's even on that side. After you place the first one, what you're going to want to do, put a few pins in here to hold it where I want it. So you place them about the same, but after you sew the first one on, you're going to want to take this row that it's sewn to the top of and follow it all the way around the back, so you can make sure that you're starting on that row on the same side over here, just to make sure they're about the same height up and down instead of just guesstimating. So we'll start with sewing this one on and move the other one if we have to. So again, across from the eye, a little bit down. It's about where I want them. So I'm gonna have this folded in half, and then once I have it in the right spot, I'm gonna open that back up. I'm gonna make sure it's a little bit away from this corner of the eye because we don't want those touching. So I'll move that if I have to. And then we're gonna do the same running stitch before that we did on the eye. So we're gonna go in, pick up a little bit, and just come out. Go down around the side here. Making sure I'm not catching underneath. Alright, and then once we get almost halfway down here, it's going to depend if you want your wings out like that or if you want them like that. I prefer them like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stitch straight across here. And then we're going to do about a stitch for every row. Make sure it's picking it up in the back. Go across here. But what you would do if you wanted the wings to like curve in a little bit, and they still will a little bit with this, but to get more of that puffiness, what you can do is instead of going straight across right here, you would go up and around this way, and then go back out to the side and then come back up. So you're going to create a little, I guess, U here. I'm just going to create like a half circle, a D, and go across, but that is an option if you want this side to stick out more, and either way it will go like that, which I like better. I'm going to keep sewing all the way across here, making sure it's flat underneath. And once I get to the edge here, we're going to do the same thing we did before, the one stitch in every stitch, and just go around this rim on the edge, making sure the wing is still straight, not tilted at all. And go back up to the top where we started. Go into the back, and then we'll knot it off the same way as before. If you by chance forgot to leave a tail on your eyebrow and you want those sewn in, you can use this to go up and stitch that eyebrow in. Otherwise, we'll knot it off with the loop, go through twice, and then pull it tight. And then because I don't have anything to knot this to under here, I'm just gonna stick it through just a few loops under here, just a couple times to make it farther across. Not enough that it sticks through the front, but enough that it leaves that tail longer, more anchors it a little bit, and then I'll cut it off, leaving a tail right there. So again, with the second wing, that kind of fell off here. Bobby pins don't help much for keeping them on unless you place them right. You're going to want to follow this around. So it's going to look like this row right here is right on top of our wing. I'm going to trace this around, and then that's where we're going to place the wing on that side. So I know what row I want it on. And then looks like a little bit more gap than the other side between that eye and the wings. I'm going to stick it on just to keep that row. And then we're going to make sure, again by folding this in half, and then using this fold on the side here to place that wing. We can go around the back again if we need to, or you could just put a bobby pin in to mark that top spot, and then we're going to sew the other wing on the same way. Alright, so I stuffed my owl to the firmness that I want it. Just have a little bit left. When you're stuffing or using polyfill stuffing, it helps a lot to like pull it apart like this before you stuff your animal with it. That way you don't have big clumps in there. I put some around the bottom here, so it sits a little bit nicer instead of just shoving it down in the middle at the bottom, and spread out to any areas I wanted, so it's nice and round on the outside. So that's about where I want it, so when I pull it close it'll be about like that. So now we're going to stitch up the top and put him together. So we're going to take this long end that we had before, and if your eyes are still in the right spot, it still should be exactly on the end. If not, you can fudge with it a little bit. So we're going to use this tail and yarn needle, and then we are just going, it's already attached, so we're just going to use the whip stitch, so going in through both, always going in on the same side, and then coming out the top and pulling it tight. You do want this one nice and tight and firm. Put a little bit of stuffing up into that corner. Just make sure that you don't catch the stuffing as you go in between, because then it will pull it into the next stitch and you'll be able to see it on the outside. I'm just going to go all the way across here. One stitch on one side, one stitch on the other. Every stitch that you crochet gets a stitch as you're sewing. Nice and firm and even and tight. If you wanted, you could also put a row of single crochet across the top of this to close it. And I want to make sure there's some stuffing in that corner. Stand up a little bit. Actually works out good for me that the color I'm stitching with with this variegated yarn blends in. If it was the blue it might look a little bit funny, but with the solid colors you won't really have that problem. Till we get to the end here, you'll be able to see a few of the stitches, but it's not bad. Alright, then on the end here we're going to knot it off the same way as we did on the inside, except we have to make sure this one is very neat and not as sloppy. So you're going to loop it through twice and then pull it tight. And then I'm just going to weave this through, go across this first layer of stitches on the top here. Just make sure that end doesn't go anywhere. And any of the other ends you can weave in like this too. Make them a little bit more secure. All these little fuzzies that came out when we were sewing. And then I'm going to take this end and then I'm just going to stick it down into the middle. Anchor that end instead of cutting it off right there. Stick it out the side and then just trim it because that extra tail is all the way through the middle there. Alright, so now we're almost done. Now we just need to do the tufts on the top corners here. So for these tufts, what we're going to do is we're going to take tails of the yarn that we used from before. You can do all one color, whether the accent or main color. I like to do both. So I'm going to take these tails and cut 10 inches, little strips here. And then you'll need 6 for each corner. So I had already cut the rest of them here. We have 12 total. And then what we're going to do is stick our hook, not a needle, hook into that top corner. There should be a stitch right there on that corner that will work well to use. And then we're going to fold all these tails in half together to create a loop. And then stick our hook through, catching all of those. They'll barely fit, and pulling them through. You may have to stick your hook through a few times to get them all through, but make sure they're about even. And then so you have this loop here, put your fingers in like that, and then pull all those ends through. Stick them again if you didn't get all the ends, and then pull them tight. If this doesn't tighten evenly, you might have to pull certain strings to get it to tighten evenly. We're gonna do the same on the other side. You could come back to front and attach it that way. I like to go front to back. It's personal preference. Fold that in half. Attach the other side the same. Just using that hook only to pull that loop through. And use your fingers to pull the rest of these through. You can do more strands, less strands, depending how you like it. You can leave them long like this. I think they're cuter if they're short and they stick up a little bit more. So I'm going to cut them about right there. Get rid of the ends. And then I'm going to cut the other side the same. Making sure they're all even, or you can make them uneven. It's really personal preference. And then stick up like that. Weave in any other ends that you missed, and then your owl is done and all ready to be cuddled.